Hi, everyone. I'm going to give you a disclaimer. This is the fourth time I've recorded this, and every time one of my children has decided to interrupt. And I've decided that I'm not going to record again, so if they interrupt, I'm just going to keep going. All right. The title of my research study is Understanding White Anti-Racist Elementary Teacher Beliefs About Teaching Difficult U.S. History Topics. I will first present you with my research puzzle, which I'll explain why it's called a puzzle in just a few minutes. The overarching question of my puzzle is, what lived experiences have shaped white anti-racist elementary social studies teachers' praxis? 3 sub-questions will help me to piece that together. How have teachers come to their beliefs that support anti-racist praxis? How do teachers' beliefs influence their instructional decision making? And how are teachers motivated to persist in their anti-racist praxis? Here is an outline of what I will be presenting to you in this research design memo. The methodology that I've chosen is narrative inquiry. The cool thing about narrative inquiry is that it centers on a research puzzle rather than a question that is to be answered, meaning that there might be multiple answers, and that as you are analyzing the participants' stories and your own story as the researcher, you're identifying threads that run through this across the stories, maybe across one participant or across all participants. And then the pieces become part of the puzzle that fit together to create new understanding. Narrative inquiry is a structured framework for exploring the ways individuals interpret their experiences. So their past and ongoing lived experiences become their knowledge, even if their memories are slightly altered or they have gaps in their memories. Participants would tend to fill those gaps with knowledge that they've gained from other experiences, or what they think they should have as part of their memories. Narrative inquiry elicits multiple constructed realities. It is very subjective, the understandings and interpretations, and it's complex when you're thinking about people's lives and their stories. It seeks to understand their experiences. There are 3 dimensions with narrative inquiry that I think help to drive the study and to help think about the influences of teachers' beliefs. Basically, one is temporality, and that is how you are entering in the midst of a person's life and their lived experiences. So they have past experiences, they have current ones, and they will have future ones. And the research text that you create acknowledges that you are in the midst, and what you're producing as a research text is not end and final and like an end all be all. The sociality dimension really honors the social construction of knowledge and speaks to the influences that are all around you in your sociocultural context. The 3rd dimension is place. And this one is an interesting one for me because I'm trying to sort of anticipate or think about what kinds of places would influence teachers' beliefs. And so I started thinking about, the school in which they teach. But that's really more of the social dimension because you're talking about the sociocultural climate of the school, not the actual building itself. I thought about, places of worship have influence, but really that's more of a social piece as well. It's not the physical space of the building that is influencing the teacher's experience. And then I've also thought about how my study is happening in the Southeast. And that's a sociocultural type of influence. So I'm really interested to see if anything comes up in the place dimension when I'm doing this study. Finally, I would like to talk about the research texts. In narrative inquiry, they are co-constructed with the participants. And so even after the interviews and after analysis, you're going back, and to me, it's a little bit more than just member checking. It is writing with the participants' and creating the text together rather than saying, this is how I analyzed it. Does this sound right? Or is this what you wanted to say? And so they become part of the creation. All right, now I'll talk about my theoretical framework. I have some theoretical perspectives that are informing me, and I'll talk briefly about those. And then I have a formal framework that is guiding my interview questions, my protocols, and my analysis. So, first is critical race theory, and I really wanted to acknowledge the tenet of critical race theory that racism is systemic and a normal, everyday part of life in the United States. And to be an anti racist educator, you have to acknowledge that piece. And so that's why critical race theory is in there, though I'm not formally structuring my study around critical race theory. The same goes for critical whiteness studies. It's important for me to acknowledge that I will be studying white teachers, and so I want to highlight some of the important aspects of critical whiteness studies, which focuses on how white people understand their whiteness, how they accumulate racial privilege, and how they can perpetuate white ideologies along with people of all races. So I'm not really doing that. I'm sort of going on the assumption that the participants have already entered that work and are already doing that work. And then there is a caution, a critique of critical whiteness studies that sort of flips it around into a critical study of whiteness, so that you can be mindful not to perpetuate dominant white voices. It will be something that I have to take care of in my study, to move beyond white racial epiphanies. And like I said before, the assumption is that the participants will have sort of already moved beyond those epiphanies, and they're like digging into the work. They've had epiphanies, or maybe they never needed to have epiphanies, and then they're like in the work. Also, that in a critical study of whiteness, acknowledge the negative effects of whiteness on people of color. And then also important, maybe most important to this study, because it is about teaching of social studies, is communicating ways that teachers integrate the perspectives and knowledge of people of color rather than including them as an add-on in as when they're teaching social studies, which is the U.S. history standards, which will be for my study, and which is mostly told through a white meta-narrative, the colonial lens, and perspectives of people of color are literally in the margins. Like, oh, also talk about how it influenced American Indians. Also talk about how it influenced the freed enslaved people, or formerly enslaved people. And so what the anti-racist teachers are doing is they are teaching the story of the United States through those perspectives, not also adding those perspectives, right? So that's a unique feature that will help to provide that sort of critical study of whiteness. All right, so those are just lenses and influences on my theoretical frame. But now I'll talk about sort of how I created my formal framework. And it kind of starts with critical pedagogy, because the definition of critical pedagogy includes critical consciousness, which is activism. The thing about critical pedagogy by Freire and McLaren is that it doesn't isolate race. Critical consciousness can come as a way to dismantle oppression in sexism, racism, ableism, any other form of social oppression. And so I will take that idea and apply it solely to issues of racial justice. I'm going to have two formal frameworks that help me with my research protocol. And one is influences on teacher beliefs. Levin has identified 5 influences on in-service teachers' beliefs. Number 1, family background and personal experiences. Number 2, your teacher education programs. 3, your teaching experience. 4, your professional development experiences. And 5, observing other teachers. And so my interview questions will be framed around those topics as I'm studying and learning about the teacher's lived experiences. In addition, I will be including elements of the anti-racist education activism framework by DM and others. I can't remember all their names right now. And there are 4 zones of anti-racist mediation. And I'm sorry, I cannot figure out how to move my face out of this. And I can't go back, so I will just talk about it. So there's the leadership domain, there's the community domain, and the policy domain, which will not be part of my study. I will be focusing on the teaching and learning domain. Within each domain, there are 4 nested dynamics, and the teaching and learning domain dynamics are that classroom education and teaching, that's here in the smallest circle. And then casting a little bit wider net is anti-racist curriculum. Then we have informal teaching and learning, which can include, sort of the hidden curriculum, I think, that, the things that you have on your wall and stuff like that. And then the influences of media and social media, especially in recent years, and with social justice movements that have really expanded through the use of social media. All right, so then my interview questions will kind of be framed around those, including with the experiences or with the influences on beliefs. So I'll put those together. Some ethical considerations that I really need to focus on are informed consent, clear, transparent communication with the participants, and opportunities to withdraw, opportunities to strike data if they change their minds about opening up about something. This is a sensitive topic, and there are implications because of divisive concepts laws or the divisive concept law, and so I do want to make sure that as this process goes on, that the participants feel comfortable with what we're sharing. With that is confidentiality and making sure that I protect their identities as much as possible, keeping my records under password protected accounts and devices, and using pseudonyms, of course, for the participants and for the location. Another ethical consideration is the relationships that I will have with my participants. They will be, as long as my district approves this research, the participants will be my colleagues teaching with me. I will likely have a relationship with them, already have rapport, and hopefully will have their trust. And I will need to make sure to use that responsibly. And then ethical publication, making sure that I disclose any additional publication beyond the dissertation if I decide to use this data for future projects. Okay, I hope this works because my recording didn't capture this slide, so I'm going to have to redo it. All right. Let me go over my research site, which is an upper elementary school in a metropolitan area of the Southeast. The student body population is 73% white, which I think is important to note because it will be part of the analysis to talk about, these white teachers in the school of mostly white students who are doing anti-racist work. The context of the site is ideal, really, because the school district and the school, which is the school where I've worked for 13 years, are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We've participated in many book study, affinity groups. Everyone who works in the school system has to go to Beyond Diversity training. And several years ago, we all participated in a study of the book Courageous Conversations, and the essential agreements of Courageous Conversations are still the essential agreements that we have at every function that we attend. Professional learning, faculty meetings, unit planning meetings, everything. And those are isolate race, experience discomfort, speak your truth and avoid speaking for others, and expect and accept non-closure. So I think this is a site that is supportive of anti-racism, and I hope that they'll approve me. I will recruit participants through purposeful sampling at the site, and I will use questions adapted from Darling Hammond's list of ways to bring anti-racist teaching into schools. And so those include like where they get their resources, how they make instructional decisions, and what kinds of what are elements of the hidden curriculum in their classrooms. I'm looking for 3 to 4 participants. Narrative inquiry does suggest 6-ish, so we'll see what I get. And of course, white social studies teachers who identify as anti-racist. Oh yeah, and the purposeful sampling, I didn't put this, but a definition of what it means to be an anti-racist. And then grades 3 through 5, because that is the sequence, or the sort of the 3-year sequence of learning U.S. history in the state standards. All right, data sources and collection methods. I will have researcher narrative beginnings, which are part of narrative inquiry. So my story will be a part of the data. I am intending to ask myself the research questions and create a document of myself. And I'll also keep field texts and memos while I'm doing the interviews. I'll have 3 semi-structured interviews in a progressive nature. So the first 2 interviews, I will pretty much have the questions already ready that kind of go through their childhood experiences with race and racism and the white meta-narrative in social studies, and then moving on to their professional experiences, and then I will be analyzing those transcripts while I'm still doing the interviews so that I can write further questions for the 3rd interview, maybe the second 2. Another data source is artifacts that teachers might feel will help them tell their stories. Could be photos, could be books they've read, or lesson plans, or just anything that they can think of that would help them to communicate their experiences. Data analysis will be, of course, transcription and initial analyses while I'm still doing the interviews. Then there will be some coding. So right now my plan is, I have the word coding, though narrative inquiry is like maybe you don't even code. But in Clarendon and in Connolly's 2000, in their book from the year 2000, they do talk about ways of coding for narrative inquiry. First round coding is focusing on character, place, scene, plot, tensions, endpoints, the narrator, the context, and the tone. And then you do multiple rounds of coding where after you've pulled those initial pieces out, you're looking for resonances or narrative threads that are across single participants and across participants. Then we get to trustworthiness and credibility. I will adhere to my theoretical framework so that I can stay focused on answering or putting together the research puzzle, co-construction of my research text. There the kids are. And, sorry about that. And reflexivity, acknowledging my own lived experiences as they are a part of the research without projecting my experiences on my participant or the participants, and making sure to keep it separate until it needs to be integrated, right? So acknowledging my experiences, which are a catalyst for the study, but then using my experience also in the formulation of the final research texts. My stories will be a part of that. I think that's it. And I'm sorry, this went really long, a lot longer than I expected. Thanks for listening. Bye.